I told my sister the sex was mediocre. That's not the part people get wrong. They think I'm the victim in this situation, that my boyfriend abandoning me for my own flesh and blood makes me worthy of automatic sympathy. But I'm the one who manufactured this entire catastrophe with 3 careless words and a lifetime of silence. I said it first. I planted the seed that grew into the monster currently devouring my life. Now my sister posts photos with him from our favorite dim sum place, the one where the owner knows our order, and my mother comments, "So happy you found someone who truly appreciates you." While I sit here surrounded by medical bills I was hiding from everyone. The real damage isn't the betrayal or the public humiliation, it's that I can never explain why I let it happen without admitting something worse than infidelity. Something that would make every single person who's turned their back on me feel completely justified. But here's what nobody knows about that night I made the comment, sitting cross-legged on Riley's bed with a glass of wine, and why her betrayal was actually the second worst thing I did to him. David proposed to me on a Tuesday, not a special Tuesday. Just a regular, bleak Tuesday in March when the rain wouldn't stop, and I'd spent the afternoon at the gynecologist getting the same diagnosis I'd been getting since I was 19. Nerve damage. Permanent. Zero sensation in the areas that apparently made other women moan and writhe, and text their friends ecstatic descriptions at 3 in the morning. David got down on one knee in our kitchen, a emerald ring he designed himself clutched between his fingers, and I felt nothing. Not emotionally. Emotionally, I loved him so much I wanted to crawl inside his skin and live there. Physically. I physically felt nothing when he touched me, and I'd spent 3 years performing like a Cirque du Soleil understudy to hide that fact. My performance was flawless. I locked my bedroom door and practiced in front of mirrors. I watched videos with the sound off, studying the architecture of authentic pleasure. I bought expensive lingerie that looked like dental floss and pretended the chafing was arousal. David would trace his fingers across my hip bones and whisper, "You're amazing," and I would count the ceiling tiles. There were 32 in our bedroom, and imagine what it must be like to actually feel his hands as something other than pressure. The only person who knew was Riley. When we were teenagers, she'd been in the car accident with me. The hospital mixed up our charts, and by the time they corrected the error, the damage was done. She walked away with a scar on her collarbone. I walked away with a body that couldn't feel pleasure, and a shame so deep I built my entire personality on top of it like a foundation. When David slipped that ring on my finger, I looked at the emerald and saw my entire carefully constructed life collapsing. The wedding night. The honeymoon. Years of performing. The possibility that one day he'd see the cracks in my performance and realize he'd married a faulty product. That night, I drove to Riley's apartment without calling first. She opened the door in pajama shorts and a face mask, saw my face, and poured 2 glasses of wine without asking. We sat on her bed, and I said the words I'd never said out loud, "The sex is just okay." I didn't mean it as a complaint. It was a confession, a whispered admission that I was drowning. Riley tilted her head, her face mask cracking as she smiled. "Just okay, after 3 years." Her voice had that sharp, curious edge I should have recognized as danger. "What's his technique like? Does he go down on you enough?" I should have stopped there. Should have said, "It's not him, it's me," like I'd rehearsed 1,000 times in my head. But I was so tired of carrying the secret alone, so I gave her what she wanted. I told her David was attentive, that he tried, that he mapped my body like it was sacred ground. I told her the problem was mine, that I couldn't feel what I should. She listened, nodding, asking questions about positions and duration. I thought she was being a good sister. I didn't notice how still she'd gone, how her thumbs were flying across her phone under the blanket, until she said, "I'm sure it's fine, Em. Lots of women need more time to warm up." I left feeling lighter, like I'd finally cracked open the door to honesty. The next morning, David made pancakes and asked if I wanted to talk about the engagement. I kissed his flour-dusted cheek and said later. I didn't see the way he watched me, how his eyes tracked my movements like he was looking for something he'd misplaced. 3 days later, he came home late from work. I was in bed, counting the ceiling tiles for the 1,000th time, when he stood in the doorway and said, "Riley texted me. She said you two had a talk." I sat up, my heart a hummingbird trapped in my ribs. "She's worried about you, about us." That was the first hook, the moment I realized my confession had been weaponized in a way I'd never intended. Riley hadn't asked those questions to help. She'd been gathering intelligence. I scrambled for an explanation that wasn't the truth. I was just venting, you know how sisters are. My voice sounded thin, desperate. "She's overreacting." David nodded slowly, but his eyes were already somewhere else. She said you called the sex mediocre. The word landed like a slap. Mediocre. I'd said just okay, but Riley had upgraded it, made it sound like a performance review. I saw myself through David's eyes, his girlfriend of 3 years, the woman he was about to marry, rating his lovemaking like a Yelp review. That's not what I said, I stammered, but David was already turning away. I think maybe we should take a step back, Em. From the engagement, until you figure out what you want. I wanted to scream that I wanted him, that I wanted this, that the problem was my broken body, not his perfect one. But the words stuck in my throat like glass. I'd spent 3 years building this lie. I couldn't dismantle it in one conversation. So I did what I do best. I performed. I cried in a way that looked beautiful, let tears roll down my cheeks without swelling my eyes. I said, you're right, I need to think. I made myself the villain in a story where I was actually the victim of my own silence. Riley started texting David more after that. Just checking on you, she'd say. Emma can be difficult to read. I watched her follow him on Instagram, her likes appearing on photos I'd taken of him. She commented on a picture of his dog. He deserves someone who appreciates his loyalty. I told myself I was being paranoid. She was my sister. We'd shared a womb, shared trauma, shared secrets. She wouldn't. But she was. I found the proof on accident, which is always how these things happen. Riley left her phone at our parents' house during Sunday dinner. It buzzed on the counter while she was in the bathroom. I glanced down, meaning to just see who was texting, and saw David's name. The preview read, "Thanks for listening last night. I needed someone who understands." I didn't read further. My hands were shaking as I set the phone back down. Riley came out, laughing with our mother about something, and I watched her pick up the phone and slip it into her pocket. She caught my eye and winked, just a sisterly wink, but it felt like a blade sliding between my ribs. That night I waited until David was asleep and did something I'd never done. I opened his phone. He'd given me his password years ago, a gesture of trust I'd never violated because I was so focused on guarding my own secrets. His texts with Riley went back 2 weeks. They were long paragraphs. He told her about feeling inadequate. She told him about her own past relationships, how she'd been with men who couldn't rise to the occasion. She used that phrase, rise to the occasion, as if my medical condition was his failing. The last message from her read, sometimes people aren't sexually compatible. It doesn't make anyone wrong. It just makes them wrong for each other. You deserve someone who's on the same wavelength. I wanted to wake David up and show him how she was manipulating him, but what could I say? I know this because I violated your privacy. He'd already seen me as untrustworthy. I couldn't become the crazy girlfriend who goes through phones. So I performed again. I became the supportive partner who gives space. I told David I understood he needed time, that I was working on myself. I signed up for a yoga class I never attended. I bought self-help books and left them conspicuously on the coffee table. I became a person improving herself so he wouldn't see the person falling apart underneath. Riley started coming over more. She'd bring wine, offer to help us talk through things. She'd sit next to David on the couch, her knee brushing his, and ask me questions like, have you thought about what you really need sexually? As if she was my therapist. I wanted to claw her eyes out. Instead, I smiled and said, I'm exploring that. The breaking point came at our friend Sarah's engagement party. Riley showed up in a dress that was too short for the occasion, her hair done in a style David once mentioned liking on a celebrity. She brought a date, some guy from her office, but spent the whole night orbiting David. I watched her hand find the small of his back when she laughed. I watched him lean into her touch, just slightly, like a plant turning toward sun. I cornered her in the bathroom. What are you doing? I hissed, gripping her wrist. Riley just smiled, that calm, infuriating smile. I'm supporting my sister's boyfriend during a difficult time. Someone has to. She pulled away and walked out, leaving me alone with the mirror. I didn't recognize myself. My face was a mask of fury stretched over panic. That night, David and I had the worst fight of our relationship. It started because I asked if we could talk about Riley. She's worried about you, David said, and I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. She's not worried, she's positioning. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. Your sister has been more supportive in 2 weeks than you've been in months. Maybe if you could communicate what you want instead of complaining to her, we wouldn't be here. I almost told him then. Almost said I want to feel something, I want to not be broken, I want to stop performing. But instead I said maybe you're right. Maybe we should see other people. I said it to hurt him. I said it because I was tired of being the one who was lacking. I said it because if he was going to leave, I wanted it to be my choice. He didn't argue. He just nodded, his face closing off like a door slamming shut. Okay. They announced their relationship 3 weeks later. Not with a big post, just a photo. Riley's Instagram showed 2 glasses of wine on her balcony, David's watch visible on the wrist holding 1 glass. The caption read, "Sometimes the right person is the one who's been there all along." Our mutual friends commented with heart emojis. My mother texted me, "I'm glad you and David ended things amicably. Riley needed someone stable." I became a ghost, haunting my own life. I stopped going to work, took a leave of absence. I spent my days refreshing their social media. They went to the beach where David and I had our first vacation. They got a dog together, the breed David always wanted that I was allergic to. They went to couples therapy with the therapist David, and I had started seeing right before the end. The therapist I'd been seeing alone for 6 months prior, trying to fix myself before he noticed I was broken. It was that detail that finally broke me. I was the one who'd found the therapist. I'd gone alone first, too ashamed to tell David why I really needed to go. I'd built up the courage to bring him in to maybe finally tell him the truth. And now he was going with Riley, working through trust issues I'd supposedly caused. I called him. It was midnight. He answered, his voice sleepy and confused. "Emma, what's wrong?" "I need to tell you something," I said, and the words poured out like blood from a wound. I told him about the nerve damage, about the surgery when I was 12, about counting ceiling tiles and faking sounds I'd practiced in my car. About how just okay was the closest I'd ever come to honesty because I couldn't admit the full truth. I told him everything. The silence on the other end was so complete I thought he'd hung up. Then he said, "Riley told me you had a condition. She said you were using it to manipulate me, that you could have gotten treatment but you chose to play the victim instead." My blood turned to ice. "What?" She showed me the medical records, the ones you faked. "She said you've been lying to everyone for years, that you enjoy the attention." His voice was shaking. "She had proof, Emma, bank statements showing you were paying for some experimental treatment but never going. I saw the dates. You were taking money from our account for it." I couldn't breathe. The experimental treatment, the nerve regeneration therapy. I'd been seeing a specialist in Canada. I'd paid in cash because my insurance wouldn't cover it. Riley had driven me to the airport for my appointments. She'd known everything. "I wasn't lying about the condition," I whispered. "I was trying to fix it." "Then why did Riley show me the doctor's note saying it was psychosomatic, that you could have been treated with therapy all along?" He sounded so tired. "She said you refused therapy because you liked being the damaged one." The room spun. The doctor's note. My Canadian specialist had suggested the trauma might be psychological as well as physical. That there could be a mental component blocking the physical healing. Riley had taken that suggestion and twisted it into a weapon. "David, please, you have to believe me." "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said and hung up. I called Riley next. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. "I wondered when you'd call." "You told him I was faking." It wasn't a question. "I told him the truth," she said, her voice syrup-sweet. "That you love being the victim. That you've been performing this broken bird routine since the accident. I told him I was trying to help you, but you refused real treatment because then you'd have to be normal, and normal doesn't get you attention." "I was getting treatment," I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. "Were you?" "Because the way I remember it, you were flying to Canada to see a quack who took your money and told you what you wanted to hear. Meanwhile, you let David think he was failing you. You let him feel inadequate. You told me the sex was mediocre, Emma. What was he supposed to think?" I saw it then, the full scope of her plan. She hadn't just stolen my boyfriend, she'd stolen my narrative. She'd positioned herself as the honest one, the helpful sister, while I was the manipulative liar. And the worst part was she had the receipts. The fake medical records I'd created when David's family, both doctors, started asking questions. The black market hormones I'd bought trying to fix myself. The bank statements showing thousands withdrawn for treatment that hadn't worked. All of it looked like a conspiracy of victimhood when she arranged it properly. The final betrayal came a week later. Riley posted a video. In it, she and David sat on her couch, holding hands, talking about the importance of honesty in relationships. She looked into the camera and said, "Sometimes people lie because they're scared. But you can't build a future on lies. You have to be brave enough to be vulnerable." The comments were full of praise. "You're so strong for moving on. David is lucky to have someone real. Your sister must be so troubled." My mother called me after it went viral among our family. "Emma, honey, Riley says you're having a hard time. She says you're making up stories about her and David. Maybe you should see someone." The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Maybe you should see someone. Not a therapist, not a doctor, someone who could fix whatever was wrong with me that made me cause all these problems. I didn't try to defend myself. What was the point? I had created fake medical documents because I was terrified of David's judgment. I had spent our money on treatments I didn't tell him about. I had lied for 3 years about the most intimate part of our relationship. Every accusation Riley leveled was, in some light, true. She just reframed it to make herself the hero. David and Riley got engaged last month. She sent me an invitation to the engagement party with a handwritten note. I hope we can move past this. I forgive you. I burned it in my sink and watched the ashes swirl down the drain. I sit in therapy now, twice a week. My therapist is kind in a way that makes me want to scream. She asks me why I think I needed to perform perfection, why I couldn't tell David the truth from the beginning. I give her the easy answers: shame, fear, trauma, but the real answer is sadder. I couldn't tell David because telling him would make it real. It would turn my private shame into a public disability. And I had watched my family tiptoe around Riley's anxiety for years, watched them treat her like porcelain. I didn't want to be porcelain, I wanted to be whole. My family doesn't speak to me anymore. Or rather, they speak to me in the way you speak to a bomb that might go off. Carefully. Infrequently. My mother sends texts on holidays. My father, who caused the accident that started this all, sends checks with notes that say for treatment. None of them ask what kind of treatment. They don't want to know. David changed his number. Riley blocked me on everything, but her profile is public, so I still see the highlights. The proposal at the beach. The ring emerald like mine but bigger. The captions about second chances and real love. Our mutual friends comment with heart eye emojis. They were our friends first, mine and David's. But Riley is better at friendship. She always was. She's the one who remembers birthdays, who sends thoughtful gifts, who shows up. I was the one who performed intimacy and called it love. Last week, I saw them at the grocery store. I was in the frozen aisle, holding a pint of ice cream I didn't need, when they turned the corner. David's hand was on the small of her back, the way he'd once touched me. Riley was laughing at something he said, her head thrown back, her neck a clean line of joy. They didn't see me. I ducked behind a freezer door and watched them through the glass, fogging it with my breath. They looked right together. David smiled at her with his whole face, none of the careful concern he'd worn with me at the end. Riley glowed under his attention like a plant in sun. I realized, with a clarity that almost felt like relief, that they were happy because they were honest. Riley had given him the gift of certainty. He wasn't failing anymore, he was enough. I left the ice cream in the freezer and went home to my empty apartment. I pulled out the medical files, the real ones, not the fakes. The ones that say nerve damage, permanent, and treatment options limited, and patient reports psychological distress related to condition. I read them like a story about someone else. Then I pulled out the fakes I'd created for David's family, the ones that said minor scarring, cosmetic only, and no lasting effects. I'd made them because his mother once said offhand, "I hope you're not one of those people who makes their pain their identity." I wanted her to like me. I wanted them all to like me. So I erased myself. My therapist asked me today what I would say to David if I could. I told her I would say nothing. She looked disappointed, so I gave her the answer she wanted. I would say I'm sorry. I would say I should have trusted you. I would say I was wrong. All of those things are true, but they're not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I'm still not sure I would have told him, even knowing how it ends. Even watching him build a life with my sister using the honesty I couldn't give him. The shame of my brokenness felt bigger than his right to know. I thought I was protecting him from a burden. I was protecting myself from being the burden. So when people hear that my sister is marrying the man I was supposed to marry, they gasp and say, "How could she?" They see me as the wronged party, the abandoned woman. They don't understand that I laid the groundwork for my own replacement. Riley just followed the blueprint I provided. She gave him the truth, even if it was twisted. She gave him clarity, even if it was manufactured. She gave him a way out, and he took it. I check her Instagram one last time before bed. They've set a date. The venue is the same one David and I toured last year. The caption reads, "Full circle in the best way." I click off my phone and lie in the dark, counting the ceiling tiles in my apartment. There are 28. I know because I've counted them every night for 3 months. It's a habit now, a ritual. A way to occupy my mind while my body refuses to feel what it should. The story I'm telling you now, all 6,000 words of confession and justification, I'm writing because Riley sent me a text this morning. Just a simple message, no context. "We're registering at Williams-Sonoma if you want to send a gift." She's so good at these small cruelties wrapped in politeness. She knows I'll understand what she means. "We're moving on, and you're still here, counting ceiling tiles." I thought about sending something. A nice knife block maybe, or a blender. something useful for the home they're building on the ruins of mine. Instead, I wrote this. Because if I'm going to be the villain in her story, I might as well tell my own version. The one where I'm not evil, just broken. The one where I was trying my best with defective parts. The one where my biggest crime wasn't lying, but being too scared to tell the truth. So here it is. The full confession. The medical bills, the fake records, the black market hormones, the 3 years of performance reviews I never gave. The way I told my sister the sex was mediocre and she heard an opportunity. The way David heard a criticism and I heard a plea for help that never came. Judge me if you want. Decide I'm the architect of my own destruction. But before you do, ask yourself what you would have done. Would you have told him the truth on the first date, the third, the 300th? Would you have said, I love you, but I'll never feel you? Or would you have performed and hoped and counted ceiling tiles until someone else told your story for you? I don't know the answer, I probably never will. But I do know this: when David kissed me, I couldn't feel it. When Riley told him I was broken, he felt that. And when he touches her now, she feels everything I can't. That's not a tragedy. That's just the truth I was too scared to tell. The engagement party is next month. I won't be there, but I'll send a gift, something thoughtful, something that says I see you and I understand. Maybe a set of wine glasses, or a nice frame for their wedding photos, something that lets them know I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Done with the lying, the performing, the counting of tiles. Done with being a story my sister tells to make herself look heroic. Done with being the cautionary tale. Done.